I will go ahead and introduce our very esteemed panel. Thank you. So let me introduce our moderator, who again is Laura Washington. She's a Sun-Times columnist and political analyst for ABC Channel 7. She's an award-winning journalist and educator. She served as editor and publisher of the Chicago Reporter magazine, and she served as the Ida B. Wells Barnett University professor at DePaul University. So please welcome Laura Washington, who will introduce our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And thanks to all of you. As you know, this is a two-act show, and you just saw a wonderful first act, and I'm so glad you're sticking around for this very important conversation as a second act. First, although, I want to give another really big, huge yes to that play that you just saw, Shelter Chicago. Bravo. And Lisa DeFranza up here is the master director of the show. Congratulations.
Yes.
As Jeff said at the beginning of the evening, a very complicated issue, and there's a lot of rich material in that play to unpack. And as he also mentioned, this is part of a bigger series that the Illinois Humanities Council is sponsoring called Media Remix. It's about looking at the media and looking at how we relate to the media in new ways and having some new conversations. And again, that play really sets the stage for it. The topic, the sort of overarching theme of this conversation is about the write-offs, because, of course, the homeless community is not the only community that many times feels that they are invisible. There are many other groups out there who feel and perhaps have good reason to feel that they don't get the attention from the public, from the media, people who suffer from mental health issues, gay and lesbian people, Native Americans, for example, a very important part of our country's history, but in many ways invisible. And sometimes even young people feel that they are left out and not part of the conversation. So what we want to get at is, why is that? The media has a role, the public has a role, all of us have a role to play. I want to start out by getting Lisa to talk a little bit more about the play. But first, before I do that, let me introduce our illustrious panel. Mark Brown, who is at the very far end, is a local news columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times since 2000. He writes about everything from political corruption, the homeless, and family life. The late Roger Ebert called him the best local columnist since Mike Royko. Mark Brown. Next to Mark is Ms. Sandra Ramsey, who is the executive director of Cornerstone Community Outreach, which is the homeless shelter that was the home of and the source of so much of what you saw in that play. It's also a nonprofit that was created to raise the quality of life for low-income residents throughout Chicago through social, educational, and economic development programs. Sandra Ramsey, welcome. Manya Brakir Pashman is the Chicago Tribune's award-winning religion reporter, and she's also played a significant role in this production as a journalist consultant to Shelter Chicago. Manya Brakir Pashman. Richard Thompson was one of the stars of the show tonight.
Oh, my goodness. Uh-oh.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Richard joined the Living News Project 2 years ago, and so he's been involved from the very beginning. At the time, he was homeless. Now he's housed and in school, but he played a central role in the writing team and, of course, on the stage for Shelter Chicago. Richard Thompson.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
And the great Lisa DeFranza, the author and creator of the Living News Project and also Shelter Chicago. Lisa is a theater director with a master's degree in theology and the arts and a senior lecturer at Columbia College, Chicago. Lisa DeFranza. I wanted to start with you, Lisa, because I think it would be helpful for us to hear a little bit more background about the Living News Project, what it is, how it connects to this play, and particularly how it connects to the media story, both in the past and the present.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I want to correct you, Laura. I want to say that I'm not the only author of this play. This play has been put together in a really collaborative way. There's some other writers. Richard is one, Alex and Jarek in the back there. You just give away. We have a core writing team, and this is kind of modeled after the original living newspapers of the 1930s. In the WPA, there was a federal theater project which produced many things all over the country, but one of the notable things that the federal theater project did was they had these big productions called living newspapers, where unemployed journalists were put to work and unemployed theater people were put to work, and they were put to work together. And they created really big issues-based plays. I think they're kind of poetic documentaries. And I've been very, very interested in them. And they traveled across the whole country, and they would be met by writing units in different cities. So, for example, one of the plays was 1/3 of a Nation, which was all about housing in our country. And the idea behind this whole enterprise was to begin discussions about national issues by inspiring people locally to collect and talk about them. I've been really interested in those living newspaper projects for a very long time. And a couple of years ago, or a few years ago now, I was tutoring at Cornerstone Community Outreach and working with Chicago Hopes. And I started to meet kids and meet their parents and became really interested in the stories I was hearing, and also interested in the fact that I didn't know those stories until I started doing this. So those two things kind of came together, the interest in the living newspapers and the interest in all of these stories that just felt like they needed to be brought out into the light. So that's how this living newspaper got started. That's how the Living News Project got started. And this Sheltered Chicago started a couple of years ago when Jarek and Alex and Richard and Chris Ramsey, all of us started to kind of figure out what this 21st century living newspaper could look like. And it's developed over the last couple of years till tonight.
It's a great way to take the past and make it part of, hopefully, the present and the future. You mentioned the fact that there's a lot of stories. You had the feeling, and certainly a big part of the theme of this play was that there are a lot of stories that are not being told. And one of the things that we decided to do when we decided to collaborate on this wonderful project is to take a look at that question. Is it true that the issue of homelessness and the homeless community is not being told perhaps as well as other stories? And so the Illinois Humanities Council asked the Medill School of Journalism to do some research, to actually do a content analysis about that question. And we asked them to compare the coverage of a really important issue that's facing all of us in Illinois right now, the Illinois pension crisis, with coverage of another very important issue that we should all care about, the issue of homelessness. And they produced this fabulous study, which I think hopefully you all picked up on your way in on the blue sheet. And I'm not going to take a look at it. There's a lot of interesting trends in it, and they don't all go one way. But one of the most interesting tidbits that I saw in it was a comparison between the coverage of pension issues and the homelessness with the Chicago Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times. And they looked at a 3-year period from March 2011 to March of this year. And they found, for example, with the Tribune that there had been thousands upon thousands of mentions of some relationship to the pension crisis, whereas in the Tribune, during that same period, there was only about 2,100 mentions of homeless issues. In the Sun-Times, there were about 2,000 references to the pension crisis, but only 570 mentions related to homeless. And there's a lot of other great information on this sheet that also looks at TV coverage as well. So there's a trend there, and the trend seems to be that some stories get more coverage than others. So one of the things we want to do is unpack that, but I wanted to come back to you, Lisa, quickly, because part of your research was you talked to a lot of journalists about this very question. And one of the interesting things that you told us was that at least one reporter talked about sort of this relationship that the media has with the public, sort of almost like a pact that the media may have with the public around what stories get covered and which ones don't. Could you just describe that a little bit?
Yeah. For this sort of iteration and the most advanced iteration of this play, I talked to a lot of journalists. I interviewed so many people at the shelter, both staff and homeless men, women, and children. And I had not interviewed too many journalists, and I realized I was making a lot of assumptions, so I started talking to a lot of journalists, and somebody said something to me that really struck me, which was they felt like there's a sort of tacit understanding, the public and the journalists, like, we don't write and publish too much about homelessness because you really don't want to read it. And that there was this sort of understanding, which to me was really an interesting kind of a way to talk about it. And it reminded me actually of the kind of understanding that happens on the street when someone asks you for $1 or something. And this weird thing, this sort of thing that happens every day on the street in Chicago where people avert their eyes or don't look at each other. And these, part of the idea of this whole thing is to start to crack into those patterns and say, well, what's really here? Like, what's really going on here?
Oh, so in a way, it's like, at least this one journalist was saying, it's like by not covering the issue, it sort of lets everybody off the hook. It lets the journalists off the hook. It lets us off the hook. We don't have to care because it's not in front of us.
Yeah.
Richard, I would like to come to you because, you know, it took a lot of courage, in my opinion, to stand on the stage and tell your own, and as I understand, a lot of what we heard tonight from you was about your own personal story and your own challenges with homelessness. Yes. So I'd love to just ask you, how did you get involved with this? What made you want to do this? Particularly, why do you care so much about the media question that came up in the play?
Okay. Well, how I got involved in this is, let's see, I was born on the south side of Chicago, raised on the west side, but I was developed in Uptown, Wilson Avenue, the Sheridan Road area. And through all of my struggles and everything that I went through, I didn't at first grasp that there was so many families with children that was homeless. But how I got involved was I am a product and a client of Cornerstone. Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey has really been instrumental in trying to give the homeless community a positive outlook and really believe in giving us thoughts that positive things can happen in our life and that we can take, it will take a long period of time to change life, but you can work toward positive aggression in your life. And as far as the media, I'm just hoping that it will shed some light that resources can be shared many other different ways than giving a homeless person cash. There can be gift cards and things that can be given all through all 4 seasons of the year that will help keep a homeless person, individual, and a person that has children. It will give them some type of resources and a better outlook for the progression in their life.
Did you learn, Richard, we all learn from these experiences, did you learn anything new about the media and how the media works from participating in this project?
Yes, I did. I did learn that the editor and reporters are either pulling back and forth. A lot of the reporters might want it's compassion plus their professionalism and hopefully to see some things get better in the homeless community. And the editor makes a lot of decisions probably based on the people that have employed the editor also, and the reporter trying to hold on to their position of having a job. And the editor has to make the decision that's best for one side of the fence, and the other side of the fence, the reporter wants to be neutral in both ways and present a story.
Oh, wow. 2 sides of the fence. Mark and Manya, does any of that sound familiar to you?
Okay, here I go.
Mark?
Well,
Mark,
I
is
don't
someone-
know that it exactly plays out the way we saw it in the play, but yes, I mean, the push-pull between we're in a business and a business that's trying to make money, and frankly, at this point, just trying to survive, folks. The newspapers are just, we're about gone, so you can kick us all you want, but you won't have us to kick much longer. And so there is, you're trying to do things that will get somebody to buy a paper, read a paper. That's a push-pull, and there is a belief in the newspaper business. I think that the public is only going to read, stomach so many stories about homelessness. And I, as somebody who writes about homelessness more than probably anybody in Chicago,
Absolutely.
I tell you, that's also my belief. I have to kind of to weigh it. I have to juggle it. I have to, if I have something where I can run with it for a while, I will. But then I know I've got to, move on to something else for a while, so people will read the next one.
Now, where do you think that feeling, that belief comes that public's only going to care so much, or that you can only get away with so many stories about the homeless or folk or groups like the homeless?
It comes from living and walking the streets and knowing what people are interested in, and you'll get so much interest. I mean, one of the things we talked about here was, conflict. I mean, conflict is news. If there is a point of conflict, I know I can get more people to read that story about something involving homelessness. If it's conflict with an alderman, for instance, or a neighborhood, whatever, I'm going to be able to get more people to pay attention to that than if I just write a nice story about a homeless person. I mean, I just did that on Easter Sunday. I wrote, to my mind, a wonderful story about a homeless fellow who was rescued from the cold on the first night of the polar vortex, and he's kept his act together now for 3-4 months, and I got no reaction to that. But, if I were able to find another story about a certain alderman who I don't want to pick on tonight for kicking around the homelessness in Uptown, I could get that on the front page, and the people would be interested. I know they would, because I've seen how it happened before.
Manya, would you agree with that
Yeah,
analysis? And of course, you're coming from a different place. Mark is a columnist. He's writing opinions, so he has more freedom maybe to sort of advocate for a particular point of view than you do
Right.
as a straight reporter. But what's your take on this?
Well, I like what you said about our quest to survive, Mark, and not necessarily to make money, because I think we'd be very happy as a nonprofit institution if we could pull that off, but I don't know if that's possible. But yeah, I mean, because if we have to bow out of that whole news feed that you heard echoing off the stage tonight, that would be quite a loss for the community. But we face these competing pressures every day. Pressures from readers, pressure from bosses, pressure from time, the incredible bevy of stories that we have to choose from, and we do have to make tough choices sometimes, in terms of what we write about and what we don't. Chicago is wonderful in that way, that it's full of wonderful stories. I love the fact that this was done 80 years ago, and it's still just as relevant and just as useful an exploration today, even more so, I would say, with the plethora of media outlets that are out there and platforms. And then it's complicated, and religion is complicated, and I'm a religion writer, so I love things that just aren't black and white and simple. I love delving deep into complicated issues, and solving homelessness in the city of Chicago, solving, violence, gun control, unemployment, equality issues. There are so many different social issues that this project is ripe for exploring. I think that's just a worthy endeavor, and so that's why I signed on. And I signed on also, and I wanted to bring this up, I hope. Lisa, when you first put the call out, well, two things. First of all, you were hearing from journalists saying, oh, I can't do that. I can't associate myself with a cause. I can't take up causes. Yeah. And I didn't really see it as associating myself with a cause. I saw it as a journalism education opportunity, and I think that that's something that the community can always benefit from, is learning how newsrooms work, learning how the institution of journalism works, what its principles are, what the pressures are, and and I just think that that is always a worthwhile endeavor. And I think reporters are part of the community. We may have a certain role in that community, but we are part of the community, and that was really important. Lisa presented a very important opportunity when she introduced this. And the second point, and then I'll shut up,
No, go ahead.
is
That's great.
the whole aspect of the Living News in the 1930s was putting together, was a collaborative effort of unemployed journalists and unemployed artists working together. And I had hoped that we could, this was a time, 2 or 3 years ago, when we were going through lots of downsizing. And I had a lot of unemployed colleagues and was hoping that this was a way to, to put that 1930s project to kind of recycle it and put it back to use. But I think there was an element of pride there that prevented the unemployed colleagues from participating, which was kind of interesting.
They were afraid to be, they didn't want to be labeled as unemployed.
Well, they wanted to find a job.
Yeah,
That was
right,
where
well,
they
that
wanted
helps
to pour
too.
their energy, which I don't blame them. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of an interesting.
And the unemployment issue, I mean, I think that was raised actually during the play, and people, the budgets are being slashed all over the place, especially in the news business, so there's even more pressure to do the same old thing or do the expected thing, the quick hit type story, because you're worried about looking over your shoulder, worried about losing your job. Sandra, I'd like to go to you because you're the advocate, the straight-up professional advocate on the stage, and you've been at this work, this God's work, I call it, for the shelter. You've been running the shelter for at least 24 years, and you were doing it unofficially even before that. Talk about your relationship with the media. You've got a well-established, important institution in Uptown. It's important to you to get media coverage for a lot of different reasons. How have you gone about doing it over the years, and what have been the pros and cons of your experience with the media?
Well, we have had very good experience with the media. We have participated in documentaries. People usually come to us. I don't really run after the media, but they come to us and they say, what do you have for this kind of story, or can you help us with this? And we've done several things with homeless children and the difficulty and how that looks and everything. And so we have done like PBS documentary and some cable TV. So we sort of look at the media as whenever we can get that little voice, we will take advantage of it and see if it can help be a voice for our residents. We are a little picky about making sure that the media would present right. We, years ago, we had a couple bad experiences with people wanting to be sensational, and so we really are careful to, ask our residents, are you interested in becoming part of this? So we've done Tribune and Sun-Times interviews and articles, and I think increasingly we have really benefited from that, and so it's good. It's a good tool.
Whose responsibility, and I want to put this to you, and then I would like to come back to Richard, whose responsibility is it to get these stories out? We're the media, we're not advocates, we're there to do our jobs. We look to advocates like you to tell those stories. Is there as much responsibility on your end as there is on our end as journalists, would you say? Or maybe even more?
I think we could definitely move into more, really I have heard hundreds and experienced hundreds of stories, just, fabulous stories, terrible stories, years of stories, and I think we're so busy sort of helping our residents that we don't have like a public relations running out and doing, and so pretty much we try to work with whoever comes to us. But yes, we do try to, we have our website, we have our Facebook, and we really try to put stories. If you go to our Facebook and our website, you will see many people with keys. We try to take pictures when they get apartments. So we try to document that, and to me, it's very important that we put what the media does when they do it well is and what we should be doing when we do it well is we put the human face to this sort of nameless, like homeless. Like when you say the homeless, it makes it seem like they're not human beings, like the homeless are a problem or something, and it's really not. That's like wrong. And so they're human beings, and they have stories, and they have goods and bads, just like us. And I think, except for the grace of God, there we would be, especially in recent years or whatever. And I think my one last thing, which I'm veering off the subject, but I think it's very important, a lot of, stories and putting faces to stories, it's for the homeless, and it's for us to get that word out and get those needs out and this and that, and get that condition out that there is, homeless issues, and we're in America, and for crying out loud, we shouldn't have this much homelessness. But it's really the thing about about helping and getting the homeless issue out there. It's really for us. It's really for those of us who aren't homeless. When I walk by the guy on the street and he wants 50 cents or $1, and I fall into this big debate about, well, what are you gonna, which I don't do that anymore. But when I'm thinking, well, where are you gonna spend it on now? Are you gonna spend it on alcohol? La la la. And probably a lot of us are like that. But it's really for us as a human being to make that choice to sort of walk by and acknowledge the other human being. It's really for us. It's not just for them. We need to get out of the realm of, we're just helping the homeless. We're helping them. It's not just for them. It's for us as human beings to lend, when I hand a plate to a person in our dinner guest program, to me, it's sort of like a weird electricity, like, wow, this is so weird that I get to hand you a plate of food. Why? Why am I handing you a plate of food? And right there, it humbles me, and it makes me be like, what, really, I don't want things to be like this. I don't want you to have to receive this plate of food from me. It's not right. Something's not right. And when we have people on the floor at night on mats, we used to, now we have beds, but I would walk by them and I would think, is something, like the next day, I would think, I know what kind of pajamas you wear. That's not right. I know what you ate for supper last night. That is not right. It's too dehumanizing. And so really it is for us. It's not just to help the homeless.
Mark, did you want
Can I just butt in? I just want to put Sandy on the spot here. In truth here, if you had your way, you wouldn't be in the news media much at all, would you?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Why?
And she's one of the best people.
Why?
The best people to deal with.
Because
She's not.
I would rather just do my thing and leave me alone. It sounds terrible, but I just want to do my stuff. And so I will acknowledge people who come and want to do, but I don't, I'm not going to run out and it's probably a little wrong. I don't know, but.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying this is the dynamic you got to understand. And part of that dynamic is that you have a responsibility to your clients of not putting them in the media necessarily. I mean, that is the attitude of, I'm of all the good shelters,
And that's what is that about? Just protecting their privacy, not exploiting them?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We must protect their privacy.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to not do that, so that's where I said I get picky about,
But by the same token, being in the media, it has a lot of value to
Yes, it does.
a nonprofit. Gets you visibility, shows you're established, shows you've got a community, and helps bring in the bucks.
Yes.
Richard, now you're somebody that's up here on the stage and telling your story to the world, so obviously you don't have a problem with being very public. What's your take on what you've heard so far?
I think that the media has an obligation to present the story in a powerful, positive light. Now, I got to figure out some of what I just meant by that. With a powerful, positive light, I believe that a lot of people probably miss the point of volunteerism. I'm beginning to believe the more and more that I educate myself and try to constantly go to different institutions to get more education. And then once you get more education, you want a better position in life. At times, I believe that okay, how should I? Some of the people that are on different income levels, they don't understand what it was to, well, I'm going to go put it on out there the best of my ability. Help me
Put it
say
out there.
Less than $25,000, less than $10,000, less than $2,000 a year. A lot of people have never experienced that. One of the greatest things that happens at Cornerstone is that people come to volunteer. So if people in the media and different levels of power or whatever would volunteer, bring their children, a lot of things in people's lives can change because there's a lot of flip version because a lot of people on the bottom can help some of the people on the top. A lot of the people on the top can help some of the people on the bottom. And that's what's needed.
Lisa?
That's when multiculturalism, and that's what's needed in
Absolutely.
this society.
Yeah, I just have something to say about the whole privacy thing, and I understand all that about responsibilities, but I feel the need to say that working on this project, one of the really most terrifying things about it for me was, learning to just walk around and hang around and ask people about their lives at Cornerstone. When I first started this project particularly, I was really scared to do that. And what I found was, I would say 9 times out of 10, people were so responsive and grateful to be asked something about life and to have a conversation on that level. And so I just wonder if, sometimes we say, we talk about privacy and then we say, so forget about it, But there was this wonderful thing that started to build. So I'd talk to one person and then someone else would say, hey, I heard you talk to so-and-so, I'd really like to talk, and, blah, blah, blah. And people were like really enjoying that. So I think we also need to somehow, I guess, listen somehow and still respect those boundaries of privacy, and I guess that's a dance for all of us.
And for a journalist, it's a tricky dance because we have to put it in the newspaper, we have to put it on TV, and as someone who's done television journalism, it's even tougher and more of a challenge. You can often get people to talk to you even off the record in a way, and you could use their stories, but you got to have that face for television. Manya, you want to
Yeah,
comment?
absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a dance. It's a good way to put it. What I thought was interesting, Sandy, is when you said, I know what pajamas you wore last night, I know what you ate for dinner, and that's so dehumanizing. And when you said that, I thought, that's interesting. Those would be great details for a story that would make that person real to the reader, and they would realize, oh, this is a real person. I have pajamas
I've
like
already
that.
written it up, so.
Oh,
But
it's not public, no?
That was an interesting perspective because it was the opposite of the way I was thinking it. But the privacy issues are definitely are difficult to navigate because yes, a lot of times I approach someone and they very much want to talk and share their story, or or somebody will say no, they're not going to talk to you, and I say, but don't they want to share their ministry with other people? Like, don't they want to tell people about it? Oh, it just sometimes just doesn't click. So, yeah.
right, so that's the challenge we have as reporters. We need to get people to talk to us. We need to get people to be willing to share very personal details. Another challenge, Mark, that has been touched on in the play is time. Time is what our news business is all about, and Lisa had, bless her heart, she's a wonderful volunteer and a wonderful artist. She had a lot of time to spend in that shelter and just getting to know people and sort of absorbing the great stories. Was that a challenge for you? How many days a week do you write? 5?
I write 4 days a week.
4 days a week. You got to
So-
turn around a daily column 4 times a week. When do you have? Is it a challenge to have the time to do those deeper stories?
Yeah, pretty much everything I do is got to be done in a day. There's really not, sometimes for a Sunday column, I can use Thursday and Friday both if I've planned well. But yes, that's an issue. But overall for the industry, of course, it's an issue because production we're production workers. We have to fill the newspaper, and so you got to get something in there. But for what I try, for my approach, it's usually not I mean, I can't go quite as in-depth as I would like, although I would believe that over time I've built up enough sort of knowledge of the issues that I can bring that to the table so that everything is a little more in-depth. But what I just try always to do is, my approach is just to try to put a face on homelessness, try to find people and tell their stories, and, you know, humanize it so that the next time somebody's on the street, they see somebody, that they'll feel like maybe they could talk to that person, or they'll at least have some idea of what that person is about, or you know, and more so realize all the people that they're not necessarily seeing.
Yeah. That's exactly what Richard, I think what you were talking about, the sort of humanizing and bringing yourself to their place. I wanted to just ask you one more question, Richard, but as I do that, if you have questions or comments of your own, we have a couple mics up here in the front on either side. Please step up. We're going to have about 15 or 20 minutes for a conversation with you, so step up and be ready. So what would you, Richard, what would you like to see, if you could see a story on the front page of the Sun-Times tomorrow, or on the 5 o'clock news on one of the TV stations, what's the story that's most important, most compelling that you haven't seen in the media that you'd like to see about this issue? Maybe it's a story you've experienced in your own life.
That had,
Or a headline, you know, what's the message that's not getting across that journalists need to hear, and that we all need to hear?
giant corporations, restaurants, and big department stores decides to help strengthen the construction industry for high-rise buildings, for families to get housed and individuals to get educated, housed, and be able to have a progression.
It's a big story.
Okay, that came up with. There's a giant housing movement going on in America.
Okay. Amen. Absolutely. Essence?
Hi, thank you guys so
Okay.
much. This conversation has been incredibly thought-provoking. My question is, what other concrete and practical ways can individuals help disadvantaged men and women and the homeless? I know that you mentioned gift cards, which was something I never thought about, and I just thought that was great, but some other things that people can leave with, and instead of just handing out money, but like, what can people do?
Great question. Sandy?
Well, of course, volunteering. We have a huge volunteer base, but that's because we have huge volunteer needs. And so there have been like youth groups that come through, and the leaders go, we come from the suburbs or wherever, or the country or whatever, and I want my students or my youth group to really experience this because they don't experience it. So volunteering is very helpful, and it sort of does that thing again of feeding the person that's volunteering as well as feeding the person that you're feeding. Other than that, so there's volunteering, and then there are any number of little projects like the after-school program. There's more volunteering. And as far as needs, we, in addition to gift cards and whatever, things like linen. And I don't mean like new linen, but like linen hygiene products, that's like gold to us. We just like run through that. So things like that, people get their groups, or their youth groups or college groups or whatever together, and they'll do a drive. Really people who are disadvantaged or homeless need really pretty much everything. So there's many ways, and I would suggest hooking on with an agency or a shelter, such as ours or anybody, Salvation Army or whoever, and ask them, how can we help? Where can we fit in? Because it is a little bit scary to just, like Lisa said, just to walk around and not exactly know, where to connect. But we have many paths that just connect you right in.
Richard, did you want to add anything? What were some of the needs that you had when you were on the street that, other than money?
Transportation, the bus, the L, to be able to get to like a Cook County hospital, a major health facility that would take you regardless of your income. Clothing, coats, any type of gifts, different organizations that people would be willing year-round to give clothing, any type of items.
Shoes, I'll bet?
Yeah, shoes, socks, gloves.
The basics.
Yeah, the basics.
Thank you.
And when everybody's not going to communicate with a person because you don't know what their reaction will be, but even just saying good morning, a smile, possibly don't have to have 3-minute eye contact with a person, but at least to show that you care. Okay.
Absolutely. That's
Right,
that's
right.
easy. That's everybody can do that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I review about 300 concerts, lectures, art openings, and plays every year. And I was wondering if you had any intention, because the production values and all that in this play were very good and well acted, if you had any intention on putting it into any festivals or bringing it to any other theaters again, to rerun this again.
I don't know.
But that's a good idea.
I'll tell you, I think I'm really interested to hear you say that. It's been our, just like the living newspapers of the 1930s, the primary thing there was put people to work. And for this particular play, the primary thing, the drive for it has always been to try to spark this kind of conversation. So it's been the driving force. It hasn't been the driving force to make a play that would, get picked up and taken someplace. If we could do this play someplace where we could really have those conversations, I think it would be very exciting. If we could run it and really have the conversations. Without the conversation, though, it's just an act one waiting for an act two. So I'm interested in that, but only if the rest of it could be kind of fit together with it, and it could be really a community dialogue.
We should find a way to make that happen. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I spent a number of years as a homeless person. I used to get picked up at 3 o'clock in the morning every day down on State Street with a van and go sell the Sun-Times all over the South Side.
Oh.
So I feel a kinship with you guys. But one of the things that, in my opinion, homelessness is a cover word for all of society's problems. Homelessness, like we saw in the play, is a problem of wars and the destruction of our veterans' lives, the prison system, the ridiculous growth of it, the cutbacks in health care, in AIDS. Every conference you go to on AIDS, they say, well, we're expecting more cutbacks, our agency's going to go out of business. All of these social problems end up under the cover word of homelessness. And I
You have
think
a question?
my question is not, in that case, I mean, when you ask what is the story with homelessness, isn't homelessness all these stories? And isn't it the media requiring to do all this? And if I may just say one thing, Mark Brown is the best columnist since Mike Reagan.
So, Mark, maybe you want to take that big question. Is this homelessness just as-
My thought, when I saw the thing about comparing how many times the word homelessness comes up, I thought, well, you could do that for, every root cause of homelessness. And really what's, I mean, if you don't understand that the public pension problem right now is a potentially huge root cause of homelessness, we're failing you because, what this could do to property taxes and knocking more people out of their homes, what it could do if, on the other end to knocking people out from the bottom on their pensions if you don't juggle it just right. All this is part of what's going on. And you wouldn't believe how many homeless people I've talked to who sold the Sun-Times at one point or another.
Wow. Well, it's a great relationship to have. Yes, sir.
My question is, in terms of what they did in the 30s to try to make the actors act or allow them to act, but also to make a nickel or a dime or whatever it was, that if you could put a price on what it would take to put your show, at least Act One, into a local high school where you could bring the actors and actresses to the high school, and you can't come without April. She was incredible. She's going to grow up to be Mark Brown. But anyway, then you could say to XYZ High School, Mount Carmel High School, for example, on the south side, you could say, we'd be happy to come out there. It's going to cost you $2,000 or it's going to cost you $2,500, which gives our kids an opportunity to go out and sell 2 tickets or something to fill the hall.
Yeah.
And then the money comes to you guys at the end of the afternoon, and we could buy Richard, some leggings like Laura's got.
Boy, you're bringing it all together. You bring on.
So anyway, but there's where you put the 1 and 1 to equal 3. The actors, and you transform
Great
it from,
idea.
to a local, and then the local comes up with the cost to, or even the Beverly Arts Center. I think this should go. Start in Chicago and go all around, and then move from there. It was incredible.
Great idea.
So-
Maybe
Thank you, that's a great idea.
maybe you want to sign on as a volunteer to work with Lisa on that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
talk.
Thank you.
I'll go sell sometimes.
Hi, I have a comment more than a question, and it's one more response to the first question that came from the audience. What can we do to change this? Well, we can think critically about all of the systems that we participate in and ask questions about how they are interacting with the homeless situation. So, we ask our schools, what are we doing for the homeless kids, and what could the non-homeless kids' families do to help those families in and around the school system? What can the church do to put together a job counseling center, a job support group for the unemployed people in our church community? What could my employer do for the people it's about to lay off in terms of putting a support group together? And so all of the systems that we are employed in, we can ask questions about how as a group we can address it, more than as individuals how we can address it.
Really good.
Lisa said she agrees.
Thank
I
you.
agree.
We have to do both, as individuals and as groups. Go back to work tomorrow and ask your boss what he or she are going to do to help on this issue.
And if it's a really revolutionary idea, it might even make it to the papers.
That's right.
Hey. Yes, sir.
Yes, I wanted to say that, you're absolutely right about putting a face on that. During war, they would use the name like Jerry's or Japs or Gooks, and so they take the human element out, so it's easier to see them as not as human. So putting a face on it is very important. One of the things that I've noticed is that out there on the streets, which is growing the homeless, is people that are losing their jobs and people that are that have lost, the medical treatment for mental handicapped, those who have addictions, and they're all under the umbrella of homelessness. And I see that as very dangerous because no matter what category, you're all under the heading of homelessness. I work for the newspaper too. I deliver on the trucks and stuff, and so I know exactly, how sad the paper has gotten over the last 30 years. And one of the things that and I'm working with Streetwise and that, and to me it's very important that we keep reminding people and hold the politicians to what they promise before they're elected. And when they don't keep those promises, we keep the heat on keep the fire on their feet. That's very important.
Well, I think Mark Brown's been doing an excellent job of doing that. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hi. So first of all, I just want to say thank you, because all of this, these sort of questions and things that you guys are pointing out and doing in this this play is sort of it's been my life and my family's life on the south side of Chicago for so long, and so just thank you so much for all this, and I really do hope that you guys continue with this and make this a thing that just goes everywhere.
How has it been? How has it been in part of your family's life?
So me and my family moved to the south side of Chicago, I want to say 9 years ago, and we run a ministry called Sunshine Gospel Ministries, and we do a ton of community outreach, and we're actually working on this one project that is sort of we want to see 500 jobs down 500 East 61st Street, because a great quote is, nothing stops a bullet like a job. And I guess, so one of our big projects right now is a business incubator. We're working with businesses and the people in the community to sort of develop the community in a very effective and purposeful way without forcing the people out. And along with that, we've done tech classes and tutoring and all kinds of training, I guess. And so I guess my main question for you guys is, how do you get the media to get the people's attention on this kind of thing? How do you ask that question and have the people answer that and really care, I guess?
Wow, that's a big question. So maybe first part is how, maybe for the media folks on the panel, what are you looking for? How do you get our attention? And for the rest of you, what are the things that we're missing in that media story? And that'll be a nice way to round it out. Manya?
Are you asking how do you pitch a story and get the media to pay attention and write about it, or?
Yeah, you said, a story that you worked on really hard and people just sort of didn't care.
Right.
Something that was very personable for the people in the story and for you, and people just didn't care. So, how do you sort of answer the question that you're asking in this play and with the media?
Yeah, I mean, I ask that every day. But the only answer that I can come up with, and Mark has been at this longer, but is just to make those stories as compelling and inspiring as possible, and try to, engage people as emotionally as possible, and make them be able to relate to the people in those stories. Kind of like what I was saying about the pajamas, just anything, just to make them relate to the people that you're writing about, so that it tugs at a heartstring for them, and they're inspired to actually, reach out and care, and they're moved sufficiently. So I just try harder and harder. I don't know if there's.
What I always end up telling people is, if you're trying to solve if you're out there working in solving a social problem, understand that you got to deal with you got to talk about the problem. So many people in the social service areas, they just want to tell you what a good job they're doing, and that's great, but that people know, just by and large, they're not going to read about that. You got to be honest about what the problems are. And I used the word conflict. Manya used the word tension. There is, tension, conflict. It still is a newspaper, and we're looking for news. And if like these stories that we heard from the actors and actresses, if the Vietnam vet tells you his story, then you have a story, and if you're working on the South Side and you're working in the violence areas, you got to help get people to see what you're seeing. That's what I always say.
Honesty and candor are just prized in our business. An incident happened in the past couple of years to a colleague where, a very unfortunate incident where the person told her a very moving, compelling story, and it was false. And it turns out that his real story would have been equally, if not more, compelling. And so it was just heartbreaking that this person felt obligated to lie, and yet his real story was just incredible and probably would have moved so many more readers. So, you know, it's honesty is so important.
You don't ever want a source to burn you, because you lie to a reporter. That's the end of the road.
Which is why we fact check and question,
absolutely.
you know, left and right, to make sure that you're not doing yourself.
Sandy, Richard, do you have any final words? I know Richard does.
Let me see. Need more soldiers in different communities. And it's a difficult situation because of, unfortunately, some negativity, some violence. But we really need soldiers in different communities, somehow, I don't know if door to door, community to community, hopefully some organizations to organizations in different parts of the city somehow can get united to interact with each other in a more stronger and positive situation. And volunteerism. I think very, very strong volunteerism around the city is needed everywhere. Simple tutoring, simple words, simple math will help inspire a lot of children in different communities. And just continue to hope and pray that people will open their hearts. Hope and pray that people will open their hearts and their compassion toward others.
Absolutely. That brings it all around full circle to the theme that it's not about the media and it's not about the public, it's about all of us working together. Lisa, I'd like to give you the final word.
Yeah, I really want to say thank you so much to everybody in this room. It's really amazing, really, to put something together like this and have so many people so interested in doing something about this, and it's just really heartening. I also, the Living News Project and Shelter Chicago is a huge collaborative project, and it takes a lot of effort from a lot of places, and I just want to say thank you to writers, to cast, beautiful cast, and to all the people along the way who've been helping this project, from organizations to Angels of People, and to the Illinois Humanities Council for co-sponsoring this event. It made it possible to really make this happen, and to Laura Washington, who's been a fantastic partner. And if you're interested in kind of jumping on this train and being part of just a gigantic, galumphing, collaborative project, here's the email.
She knows how to pitch.
livingnewsproject@gmail.com. livingnewsproject@gmail.com. So really, if you're interested in all of that, send an email.
Hey, thanks to this illustrious panel. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thanks to you for coming and joining in. Jeff, did you want to say a final word?
How about a round of applause for yourselves for staying all night? Thank you. How about a round of applause for Laura Washington, our wonderful moderator?